And joining me in studio is Eric Mandel, founder and director of the Middle East Information Network and senior editor for security at the Jerusalem Report. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. Eric, I want to ask you, all the mediators, the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt have agreed to this outline. Netanyahu says he backs it, but Hamas is rejecting it. How are these mediators going to be able to convince the terror group to agree, and how will these Arab mediators get enough leverage in order to pressure the terror group, which is not even taking part in these negotiations?
So I think sometimes when I read the reports, they put Netanyahu and Hamas on equal footing, and I think we kind of forget, one, that we're dealing with a American designated terrorist organization, and the other, our most important ally in the region. Second, when Americans talk about ceasefire, they think they hear the hostages are going to be released, not that this is just a partial release. But you have to realize, if you're looking at America, we're in political season now. And this ceasefire is incredibly important for the Biden-Harris or Harris team running for election, because no war before an election. And American does not have a strategy. I unfortunately, and I'm not sure Israel has a strategy for Iran either, but basically what needs to be done is not just kick the can down the road here, but how do you get here regarding the hostages, this emotional issue that you're dealing with, and what will Netanyahu have to give up? I've been in the field, I've been in the north, I've been in the south, and when I talk to the soldiers, officers and regular soldiers, reservists, nobody thinks Israel can give up the Netzarim crossing or the Philadelphi corridor, their oxygen supply. So I don't know how you're going to square the circle here.
And that leads me to my next question. How effective do you think Blinken's shuttle diplomacy trip to the region will be in these negotiations? Well,
I think one of the things, again, I would have advised my government, and I've been talking to for years, is that we should have been applying much more pressure on Qatar, as supposedly an American ally, a major ally, non-NATO, that they have influence. They've been supporting Hamas. And so I think we're giving them a pass that they're somehow a good mediator. And I don't think the Egyptians are necessarily, that's with the next stop, by the way. This week, they're going to be talking in Cairo. Then that's not necessarily just a pure, a fair party. But we have to remember the Egyptians, that is a country that voted not long ago, about 80% for Salafists, either the Muslim Brotherhood or worse.
I want to bring into the conversation Dr. Eli Kalmon, senior researcher at the Institute for Counter-Terrorism at Reichman University. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Eli, give us some insight into what Hamas leadership is doing and some of the rhetoric we are hearing in the past 24 hours, as I mentioned, rejecting that latest proposal that they're calling a Netanyahu-aligned deal. But what cards do they have left at this point?
I would like to highlight what, in my opinion, is probably Sinwar's position, because today there is no other leader that can decide about it. The Haniyeh was killed, Mohammed Def was killed, and practically only Sinwar, which was nominated the Secretary General of the Political Bureau. He is the only one which decides the fate of the negotiation and of the hostages. Now, why Sinwar would accept today deal? You know that since the beginning, Hamas and Sinwar personally were very disappointed that Iran did not participate from the beginning in their attack on Israel. So why today, when there is a chance from their point of view that Iran and Hezbollah will threaten, will attack Israel, this is the moment that they accept a deal of exchange. So I think that from this point of view, it is a negative position from the point of view of Hamas, and we see they didn't participate physically at the encounters, and also the last answer they gave is negative. Now, also from the Israeli point of view, I don't speak about the very sensitive issue of the Philadelphi Road, of the Rafah passing, of the Netzarim passing. These are very difficult issues indeed to solve. Let's say this will be solved at some stage. Look what happened on the Israeli side. Just 2 days ago, 3 days ago, Minister Ben Gvir went to visit the Temple Mount. this is a huge, a huge issue for the entire Muslim world. Hamas itself, in May 2021, opened a war against Israel because of a visit to the Mandel temple and also because of the Sheikh Jarrah. So how exactly Sinwar today will see the decision of the minister, but also with the approval of Prime Minister Netanyahu for this visit 2 days later, and also how the Iranians, which are the defenders, the so-called defenders of the holy sites of Islam, will view this kind of visit. So I think from the two sides there is a negative approach. And in my opinion, I'm quite skeptic about the results of the dealings, and also I'm optimistic in the sense that the longest are the negotiations, at least we don't have an attack between of Iran and Hezbollah against Israel, and we should speak also again what exactly the two sides, I mean Iran and Hezbollah, can do against Israel.
Eddie, stay with me. I want to discuss one of those points that you just brought up. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad have claimed responsibility for the attempted terror attack that occurred in Tel Aviv Sunday night. The terror groups are vowing to carry out more such suicide bombings. Our Middle East correspondent, Ayaan Ossan, has more details on the blast.
A major disaster averted at the last minute by sheer luck. A massive explosion rocked southern Tel Aviv on Sunday evening. Initially believed to be of criminal nature, the police later said it was a failed terror attack, as Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad claimed shared responsibility.
The explosion was right under my apartment. We felt the blast and suddenly the power went out. We were in the middle of bathing our little girl. We were frightened for a moment. We thought it was Hezbollah, Hamas, or whatnot.
A man seen here in CCTV footage carried the bomb in his bag minutes before the explosion.
Forces that arrived on the scene discovered a severely mutilated body with explosion marks on the wall of a nearby store. We are investigating all options here, and I can say that the option of an attempted terror attack is very relevant due to the nature of the scene.
The police said he was a Palestinian from the West Bank. He was killed at the scene after the device most likely exploded prematurely. Another man who passed by in a scooter was moderately wounded.
It was a big miracle. We were in the synagogue and suddenly there was a massive explosion and we saw the fire. At first, I thought it was a drone. Others wondered if we had suddenly returned to the Intifada days of exploding buses. There was a lot of fear and panic.
If successful, this would have been the first bombing attack in Tel Aviv in 18 years. Back in April of 2006, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad suicide bomber blew himself up at a downtown shawarma stand, killing 12 people and injuring dozens. The failed attack comes as Palestinian terror groups increasingly try to establish a foothold in the West Bank, hoping to turn it into a launchpad for suicide bombing attacks. And for the residents of Tel Aviv, it's a concerning sign in a rapidly changing security reality. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad promise more attacks.
I want to turn back to my guest, Dr. Eli Carmon, senior researcher at the Institute for Counter-Terrorism at Reichman University. Eli, Hamas and PIJ are vowing more suicide attacks. Do you fear we could be experiencing or could be potentially looking at a third intifada?
It will be very important to see the end of the investigation of this failed attack, because it is not clear who was the target or what was the target of the attack. It's very interesting that the person that was killed is a Palestinian of 50 years old, which is not a normal suicide bomber in the Palestinian arena. So they took care to send somebody which possibly is easier for him to pass through the checkpoints and arrive in the middle of Tel Aviv. We must remember that Hezbollah has vowed also to kill some military or political figure in Israel. And perhaps this was one of the targets or the target of this suicide bomber. So we have to wait to the end of the investigation. Anyway, such a bombing would be an attempt to sabotage the negotiations, either by Hamas, by the Hezbollah, or by the Islamic Jihad. And it shows that when there are very important moments in the political arena, and this is the political arena, the issue of the negotiations, the terrorists always try to sabotage the normal process.
Meanwhile, another developing story today, an Israeli man is accused of being paid by Iran to incite the Israeli public against the government. 30-year-old Eden Debs from Ramat Gan has been indicted by the state attorney for being paid $12,000 worth of cryptocurrency by the Islamic Republic to hang up posters calling for a military coup and carry out other tasks for Iran. According to the indictment, Debs was reached out to by an Iranian source and acted on its behalf while knowing it was an agent from the enemy who asked Debs not to reveal the connections between the two. The state attorney said that he had also helped promote a Telegram group called the People's Army, used to recruit Israelis to take pictures, run errands, and complete other missions for Iran. And in some cases, the state attorney mentioned Debs documented his tasks, including purchasing a phone, SIM card, a wig, gloves, and hat to prove to the Iranian agent that he had, in fact, completed those tasks. Eddie, I want to get your assessment on that incident and walk us through the Israeli security agency's efforts to foil Islamic Republic terror activity, both at home and abroad.
For many years, the Iranians, together with Hezbollah, have tried to recruit Palestinians, either inside Israel or in the West Bank, in order to stage terrorist attacks. It was very important for them. We hear that lately Iran is doing a lot of effort to smuggle weapons to the West Bank. I can tell the public, for instance, that by the end of the Second Intifada in 2004, when practically most of the Palestinians, including Fatah and Hamas, did not want to stage terrorist suicide attacks, Iran and Hezbollah paid $9,000 to potential terrorists and their families in order to stage suicide bombings. And this was, by the way, discovered by the Palestinian Authority and published. So clearly, these attempts will continue, and the work of the security service and of the police is to try to foil these attempts.
All right, Eli Kalman, thank you very much for your insight this afternoon.